Welcome, dear faithful, to the podcast that dives into the sabotage, betrayal, and murder of the current season of the Traitors. We are your Traitor Joes. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome back to another episode. We are here to recap episode 4 of the Traitors US Season 2. And we're living. Girl, I live.
Taken off.
Taken off, and girl, we live, but someone will die in this episode. Before we get started, what's your Joe today, my fellow Joes? What are we having?
My Joe is Joe. Ice Joe.
My Joe is also Joe. Hot
Goddess,
Joe.
featuring Goddess.
Yeah, featuring
Okay,
Goddess.
Goddess and the gross hair.
Yes.
I've never... would you believe that we have never gone
Oh my gosh.
to any Goddess and to... Not the same, but to any goat, too. I've never gone to any of the goats. Any of the Stephanie Izzard goats.
Different conglomerates, but...
Different conglomerate, but Chicago
I would say
faves.
both at the top of my Chicago list, so when we have our live show, we'll go.
Yeah.
When we
Take you
do
to
our
the tourist spots.
when we do the tour after the
Yeah,
season,
of course,
absolutely.
obviously. And I also
Who-
have just a
You also
shot
have Joe?
of Kona Joe.
Oh, who? If we ever did a tour, who do we have to have?
Janelle.
Guess Janelle, right?
Yeah, so we got to go to Minneapolis.
I mean, yeah,
Minneapolis.
I think that could be an easy trip. I mean,
easy
Janelle
for
and
you.
Tamara are potting
I
about
think
the
it's-
show.
yeah.
It's Tamara's pod, is what
It's
I've
Tamara's
seen, and Janelle
pod.
was the first guest, which tells me that they might
Stick
be together
around.
for a minute, so that's good for me.
It makes. I mean, we're gonna talk about cliques a lot on this episode, but seeing that clip of them together makes me think, okay, like this whole spinnerelli of the Bravo Housewives versus the gamers, it feels like just something to ruffle the feathers. But I think people are gonna
Right.
see through it and work
Yeah.
with people.
At some point we gotta get over this.
Absolutely. But let's go ahead and get started. We're here to recap episode 4. We're going to try something different. We're going to have a Joe kind of lead the convo for each of the main parts of a Traitors episode, which is, you know, the breakfast shenanigans, kind of like the first third, and then the mission and post-mission, and then we're going to get to the round table and the Traitors turret. We'll see how this goes. We're trying something new every episode.
Yeah, we're new, we're evolving, we're responding to feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, take it away. Let's talk about where we left off last episode, which was the poison chalice.
So we left off last episode. Parvati was going from room to room, kind of figuring out who she could poison and therefore murder with the chalice. And, you know, looking at it again from this episode, I have a feeling this was a pretty long span of time because there's a couple scenes where Parvati's in the kitchen early and then she comes back to the kitchen later and the group of people in there is larger and they're more rambunctious. So I feel like this was over multiple hours. So we kind of open with Parvati in the kitchen and she kind of like saddles up near Ekin and Dan and she goes right in for Ekin. And she gives her the chalice, and Ekin, I think, has had probably a few beverages at this point. She's very loose, and she's like
very loose, right?
Yeah, she's like, when I get out of here, I'm gonna know who the traitors are, and I'm gonna f them up hard. And she was really going for it. And Dan and Parvati are giving her these looks because they know what's about to happen, essentially. And sure enough, she takes a sip from the chalice. We get a replay of it, and she is poisoned.
She's toast
is poisoned. Now, we were talking about leading into it. We had some options. I thought it was going to be one of the boys. I really thought that she was going to... She kept describing it as a Hail Mary, that I kept thinking she just went for someone that could easily do it. I didn't. And I think this is part of editing. We don't know the relationships that's going on, right? So like when she was like, I found Ekin-Su, she's the only option that I can do. I'm very close with her. I'm like, well, I wish I kind of saw
that.
those
we haven't
anything about that.
We haven't seen a lot between them up to this point. So that surprised me.
And
I almost wish, the episodes be longer just so we could see some of these friendships? But I also don't want that.
It's just enough with all the other things we have to watch.
Enough. Yeah.
And the last episode kind of left us her like walking towards Janelle, and I was really nervous about that aspect of it, obviously. So I'm relieved that it was Ekin-Su, and I can really see Ekin-Su falling for this given her state. So that's kind of the poisoning. Then we get a very small cut in saying that Deontay left the game after the events of the last episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was really surprised by this. I had a reaction to it. And then I think after the episode aired, I saw a news story that, where Deontay had interviewed and responded and said that he chose to leave the game after that, I guess, second roundtable, it seems, after episode 3.
Max. Yeah.
After Max's departure, and basically saying that the experiences were drawing up a lot of past trauma that he had experienced. He didn't think it was good for him and his mental health to be in the game, so he chose to leave. And I think
that just proves that it's hard. I think people give reality TV kind of the flack of it's easy, quote unquote, but you need to kind of have a shift in your mindset to go into it and being game for everything, Yeah,
you really have to be ready for it. And we had talked last episode about how some of the things that Deontay was doing in response to people leaving or being banished were really showing that this was new for him and was really hard for him, the way he was taking it. So I'm glad that he did what he needed to do. And I also think the post, in a different world, the post reaction to him leaving is very different than someone who would have departed a show 15 or 20 years ago when some of these people were on TV the first time. We didn't have a culture of discussion about issues like this. So I think it also says a lot about how we treat these topics now, that people were really supportive and respectful of his decision to leave. But it's definitely sad to see him leave the game. I was a big fan. I thought he was really genuine. I thought he was building relationships. I thought he could have been around for a little while. So it was sad to see him go.
I think he would have been, we talk about cliques in this episode, he would have definitely been in the faithful clique where it's you are faithful by default. There is no chance in hell that you are a traitor. And I think he could have gone really far.
He wasn't on
because he's not
radar.
a target. He was not a target. He was not on anyone's radar. So he could have just rode the middle to the end potentially.
But I will say it's hard because we switched them all to celebrities, right? And so by not having someone who doesn't have this experience, by almost kind of singling someone out like Deontay, that takes a toll. Because everyone was I know, it's part of the game. Everyone kind of has that understanding, but he really took it hard. So
for sure. Yeah. So then, we kind of quickly move on to the breakfast. And, since Ekin-Su got the poison, we don't know what's going to really happen here in terms of who's showing up for breakfast the next day.
Yes.
So in a twist that we haven't seen before, the Traitors are the first ones to enter the breakfast room. So they get kind of a private
they haven't talked.
They kind of a private little kiki moment where Phaedra just learns about who got the chalice, and Dan gets the confirmation as well, because he didn't know for sure that Ekin-Su was poisoned either. We get a confessional of Parvati saying that, or of Phaedra saying that Parvati isn't the most liked, and why would anyone drink from the chalice that she's holding? So we're kind of also getting this side image that Phaedra might not think the highest of Parvati, but we don't really see that play out.
We don't see it at all. I think the only time I saw that tension was obviously when they were going out. She was going to try and give the poison chalice to Cirie, and we see Phaedra kind of get Cirie out of there. But then also that clip of her being it's not going to be one of us. Right. Sorry, try again. But yeah, it kind of took me for a surprise because we'll get to the twist at the end of Phaedra versus Parvati, but she says that Parvati isn't liked, and it's one of these things I wish I was seeing just a little bit more of people talking about her, just so we can get
up to this point. I don't think we've heard a lot of confessionals or small conversations that put Parvati's name out.
Totally.
So then, they keep kind of rolling into breakfast. Janelle comes in and she says that she really wants Phaedra to stay. Like Phaedra is her favorite of all the housewives, which is interesting given what we just talked about Janelle and Tamra really being, besties in the post.
So I think that develops. I'm very excited. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, let's connect those dots. Something's going to happen.
I bet you Tamara is like pitching like, girl, we gotta get a Real Housewives up in the north. And I think you're the right girl. I think Janelle's trying to work that.
We need a Midwest.
And Tamara's old school, so she's probably got the cred to like
absolutely she can do it.
They're rolling.
We're gonna call it here first.
Yeah,
we're gonna see Janelle.
Every Housewives franchise needs a real estate mogul, so Janelle fits that trope perfectly.
Totally.
I would love to buy a house with Janelle as my agent.
With Janelle, I will say, I watched this episode with Adam, and every time Janelle talked, she has some great moments in this episode. But every time she showed up, Adam was like, "Who is she?" I'm like, "You don't even know.
How can
you don't even
not
know? This is a legend."
He needs to be educated. He needs to get.
He needs to watch season 6. We will give you our Paramount Plus if you needed to watch season 6 of Big Brother.
Okay, so they keep filing in and. We get talk from a few people about groups or alliances at this breakfast in the talking heads. CT notices the alliances. He talks about the housewives. He, says it's very obvious, but it would be nice if one of them was murdered. Then we kind of get Janelle running through the different cliques, which I think really sets the scene for the tension.
Producer Janelle.
Producer Janelle.
Janelle is the narrator at this point in the season.
I think she is the narrator of the season.
She says there's the Bravo girlies, which are the clickiest. So it's all the housewives plus MJ.
Yeah.
You have the gamers, which is like the challenge people, Big Brother, the survivors, right? And then you have the faithful, so the Bergie, the John, and then she says Kevin, specifically says that Kevin is a dumb faithful.
Her words, not ours.
Isn't it so? I did not expect Kevin to be the Ryan Lochte, just here for a good time. But they run with it all episode. The only time we see Kevin is eating. Open mouth.
Yep. Or just like tennis matching people's conversation.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so funny. This, episode 4, you're already getting the Emmy for best casting. I don't know what to tell you.
They're setting him up to be like a big goat right now.
Yeah,
totally.
Like he's like major floater vibes, doesn't really contribute a lot, and is like constantly talked about in confessionals.
But interesting, not like Ryan Lochte, because I think everyone knows that going in with Ryan, but at least he's like a hype man, so he's like lovable and like a fun time to have around.
Kevin's not bringing that.
Does not give the same vibe.
Not at all.
Where's the fun?
So they file in. Larsa comes in after kind of everyone is starting to get seated, and she's Larsa is like the center of her own show.
Good.
She's putting herself in the middle here, and she points out everyone in my circle is murdered. It's just a matter of time before all of my allies are murdered. They're coming for me, and it's just like, okay,
it's so good.
Sure.
It is this is what I love about the reality show TV editing, is that sometimes you don't know what's going to happen at the episode, right? Like you just have to kind of plan out, like for producers, they just have to plan out the day and then see what happens. But there are these things, these self-fulfilling prophecies that just come out, and once you hit it, you're like, I have the episode. It's done. It's so good that Larsa said this, because it ends up becoming about her.
Yeah, it becomes like her episode, basically.
Yeah.
For sure. God. And then, surprise, surprise,
surprise,
Sue walks through the door.
Surprise.
And the reactions from Dan and Parvati. Dan looks so excited, like he's just thrilled to see Sue, whereas Parvati looks perplexed about what exactly is happening. And then John comes in. Obviously no one was murdering John. People are like, is John going to get murdered?
John's the last one to arrive.
He's the last one. No murder.
So who's dead?
So when Sue's name was up, when Parvati tells the other traitors, there's this like also this moment of Phaedra kind of like, oh Lord, not Sue,
why
girl,
would you do
not Sue, because she was one of like the two people that wrote Sue's name the night before.
Last episode.
So,
yep. It doesn't become a thing, but it's a moment for Phaedra to communicate.
Maybe it's
her
also the Phaedra Parvati tension is building, right?
That's
and
true.
that's just like the beginning of it.
But I will say, to Phaedra's credit, she is thinking about all these things that could point it to her in a room where no one is truly pointing anything to her. Because even when the housewives things that called out at the banishment, it's not her that people are curious about. It's Larsa and Taylor and MJ. So
I think that's kind of what Parvati ultimately ends up pointing to later, but we'll talk about it at the end.
Yeah. So then Alan comes in. And there's suspicious Parvati.
The suspicious Parvati. Parvati's pouting is if you were a person watching like people's acting tics, I would call it, she loves to pout.
So some of you might know that like an often cited tip for a great photo is to say prune. I think that's a Mary-Kate and Ashley tip, right?
Pruning.
Yeah, I think we have Parv as a new one because Parv is pruning all the time.
Very,
all
very,
the
very
memes on Twitter have been like, someone give Parvati some glasses because it looks like she's trying to
either
read across
glass
the
memes
room.
or like smoldering memes.
She is squinting. Yeah. Squinting in confusion.
Squinting in cunt.
Yeah. Serving squint.
You better not be serving. Yeah.
So she's squinting. She's confused. But then Alan walks in and one of his best,
one of his best
looks.
Gosh.
Now, I just real quick. This is like the base of what he wears all episode, right?
I think
and everything
so.
else is
We're kind of just modifying this.
Everything
look.
is dolled on and off of him, paper dolled on and off all day.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
This is what comes in the box. So he's like clothed, and then everything else just
you buy the extra stuff.
The cape is on the other side.
Yeah, of course.
The accessory pack is sold separately.
Mm-hmm.
So then he reveals that the murder took place in plain sight, and that it's going to be a slow death. Kind of like a poisoning for whoever has been impacted by whatever happened the previous day. And then everyone kind of starts spiraling as to what exactly that means. And you've got those post-breakfast discussions where everyone's kind of pointing the finger. Kevin's discussing Tamra, saying that she wouldn't poison Kevin because he's annoying.
Kevin said I was eating everything, so it could have been me, right? I think this is where we get that.
Yes,
moment.
His talking head is literally he lists everything that he ate, and it's so funny.
So if something was poisoned, it was going to be him.
Yeah,
he's convinced.
He's convinced.
And then everyone kind of leaves the room, and then you start to see them splitting up into smaller groups. So you sort of have the Cirie, Larsa, like housewife segment with Ekin-Su and Kevin also present. Larsa then starts the trope that becomes this episode of it's got to be an alpha, right? It has to be a male.
What do you think about this alpha discussion? Because
I don't see it in the formula that she's referring to.
I also don't see it in that room. It doesn't feel like if I was in that room with them, I would say the only alpha truly was probably Bananas and like the presence. I don't get that from CT at all. I don't get it from anyone else.
No.
My other thought on that is in other game show or reality competition shows like Survivor or Big Brother, when you're talking about an alpha male and maybe challenge, but again, I'm not a challenge expert, the alpha male is usually referred to as like the physical threat solely. Like they don't contribute socially, right? Like they're the brawn. They do they're the muscle, they're the horse, they do the work, whatever. Like we need them in the physical challenges. Bananas and CT and Dan, like they have social skills in these games. So like that's for like when we think about alpha males in this environment, like we don't even have one. Like alpha male was probably Max.
Yes. It's just very interesting for Larsa to pick it out because I think she's on the right track of saying it's clearly a man because there's so much less of them now.
And it
elf
could be a
thing doesn't
gamer
fit.
because the gamers ain't dropping.
Because the gamers are not going. But I think it feels misplaced of what the word she actually means is. I think she means like a man that's kind of pulling the strings, but I don't think alpha.
And none of these are
It's
playing
not really
overtly
happening.
either. No one is being super, audacious and big and loud.
No.
Like no one in this group is. So yeah, it's a little, we might
feels-
be conflating some terms here.
Yeah. But it was just very funny because they kept saying it over
Alpha
and
male.
over
Over and
again in
over.
this
And then
episode. Alpha
some
male,
like a
alpha
little
male.
micro thing is you even hear Trishelle pick up that line alpha male. She talks about it in a confessional at the end of the episode, and I'm thinking like, is she only saying this because
She
it's
only
been
saying
like
because it's
in
the word.
water today?
Yeah, I think so because she describes someone else as it.
She describes CT as an alpha male, and I'm like, whatever.
No, he's not, girl. He's in the same spot as you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. But I mean, Larsa runs with this, so.
Yeah. So, Larsa even takes the girls over to the breakfast room to look at all the pictures
All the
on
faces.
the wall.
Let's
And
go to
starts
the board.
pointing.
Let's go to the
let's go to the
board.
board. Let's figure it out. And she kind of narrows in on a few people, but
We're gonna come back to that after the mission.
Yeah.
And then, Trishelle, they're kind of talking about who poisoned me,
Who
Trishelle.
poison? Yeah, what's the poison? What's going on? Yeah.
Trishelle says somebody offered me wine, but I can't remember who. This also goes back to this must have been a long night sort of idea.
What
She's
I've
talking about
noticed
Ek
about-
and Sue.
Yes, this is what I've noticed about Trishelle. She loves to make when it clicks for her head that something could be what's going on, she makes it so loud, so open. Like, I remember getting wine. I don't remember who, but
I
it
just
was
had
Ek and
wine.
Sue.
It's kind of like
I
it's
don't
kind of
know.
pick me energy.
I don't even know how she got to Ek and Sue. It just seems so random. It's one of those like girly things where it's like, I don't like Ek and Sue, so I'm going to blame her sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then we go to Janelle and the talking head.
This talking head is chef's kiss.
I
Janelle
do
is
want a
fully like
confessional. I want a confessional count because there's so much. I'll find it.
there.
but-
Yes, I want someone who in the Instagram post who like counts how many times
we need
people have
that. We
done
need
the
talking
table.
Traitors US stats. on
because this
Instagram. We need
episode,
that.
Sheree has her very first talking head since the
Oh
show
my gosh.
started. So
So then Janelle says a series of one-liners about
So
Ek and
good.
Sue. Ek and Sue sucks. She says Ekin's a black widow spider, which is ironic because
is ironic.
That's
Parvati's
Parvati's thing.
Yeah, that's hers.
She said she's a bad actor. She's a phony baloney. I mean, just all of these things.
all of these things. It's so
about
good.
Ekin.
She hates her for I would say
For
for no
what
reason.
reason? I don't
but
know.
obviously because they fought. She tried to steal her shield.
But that conversation goes in perfectly with her look for the day. So if you show the next one,
Bam. It's
Yes,
so good.
then we split off into these different scenarios. I could just imagine the producers telling them to split up and go.
yeah,
do
hey
these
guys,
things.
go do this.
go outside
do
and
that.
play croquet, please.
Yeah.
Who has a croquet set? Fine.
It's just like I need a group in croquet. I need a group still eating. Let's go.
Yeah, it's
who
got
wants
to be
who's
that.
done and can go outside.
So tell us about this look.
Yeah, so as soon as I saw the croquet setup, I thought, okay, well, we all know the reference for croquet is Heather's. And then we get Janelle outside playing, like leading the group, holding court outside. And I feel like we're starting a section of the pod here where it's like, what movie is Janelle featuring
What
in
mo-
her look?
yeah.
Like, what is she referencing? And I'm sure it's unintentional, but I think we get a great Heather's moment here where Janelle is like, she's got this big, beautiful, like varsity oversized sweater on.
So good. She looks great. She really
looks
does.
Good. She looks so good.
She looks good.
Holding the croquet mallet. And everyone else is really just around, almost in awe. And
Yeah, no one's really playing.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, is this like mini golf?
Bergie's out there. Bergie probably doesn't know what's going on.
Sandra is there just listening, I'm sure. Parvati's there. CT is there featuring Donk, which I've seen some Donk discourse about CT on the internet. So there's that. And
Checks
then,
out.
Sandra, they kind of walk back in. You get some Parvati Sandra talk, but you start to wonder what happened to Sandra's forehead.
Yes. So Sandra has like a mark on her
She has
forehead.
a scar.
This is definitely, it's like it's redder here the most. And Did you guys find out? Did you find out what happened?
She mentioned on Twitter, I think
so.
that
somewhere on social.
She fell during the previous mission. So I guess the night before.
The graveyard one?
The graveyard heist. Yeah, she which, I mean, that I'm sure that happened to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was dark. There's a lot of things on the ground. So she's fine.
Yeah, she's okay.
How are you feeling about Sandra? How's Sandra's doing?
So there's more Sandra bits this episode, but after this episode, I'm like, Sandra's in kind of a good spot.
She is, isn't she?
You know, because she's been playing the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is how she won her first 2 seasons. This is how she does it.
I want to come back to this because Sandra's pretty pivotal in setting up
what
the round table to this episode.
Absolutely.
And manages, at least from what we saw,
to escape untouched, totally.
And so she is, I think I mentioned maybe last week that we get just enough of Sandra to tell me that her time is still coming, which means she's in this, but she's doing really well. She's super well positioned.
Yeah. I think she's playing a much slower game than, Parvati kind of has to play a fast game since she's a traitor now, but she's doing a good job of being friendly with the housewives, but truly being in the gamer clique of it all. And kind of feeding them information about what the housewives are saying. So let's see if that kind of progresses in the next episode.
Yeah.
So then kind of the last part of this post-breakfast discussion is, Dan and Parv kind of meet up in the kitchen and say hey, at some point we're going to have to throw Phaedra out of this game by putting a target on her.
What? This is bold, right?
It's
right away?
Yeah.
So early.
It's a little early, but, they're obviously recognizing that of the 3 of them, she's going to be the last found out, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to be targets before her because of their reputations, right? So, Dan's kind of setting up Parvati to sort of kind of take the heat for whatever they're planning to do towards Phaedra.
Yeah.
Which, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
I wish they played this out just a little longer. I wish they waited a little bit to pounce, but it makes sense for Dan. The numbers for the men are dwindling and his name has already been called out. So he's in survival mode right now.
Yeah, he's trying to throw the heat off of himself.
Yeah, Larsa's got him pegged, basically.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So from there, it's time for today's mission, this episode's mission. And I think Alan says basically dress for a funeral. And this is where
she does, girl.
And she does. So Alan, at the next time we see everybody, we're outside of the castle. We're kind of at the entrance. Alan says dress for a funeral. And she does. So she looks amazing. She's added on a cape, another cloak. We have this we see a lot of veils now because we're all preparing for funerals.
A lot of veils.
And we find out that this mission is really to find out ultimately who was murdered in plain sight. And so we get a processional setup with carriage with these black horses. And the challenge for the group really is to the walking and Phaedra going. This is so weird to me, but as a funeral directress, I feel right at home because Phaedra Parks owns a funeral.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I thought it was a bit for the Traitors.
No, she owns one. And when she said it, Adam and I were like, that's right. Phaedra Parks is a funeral directress.
God, what doesn't this woman do? She's
this is what I'm saying. She is set up for success. She is set up to be to take it and run with the show, right? And so
she's so good.
It's going to be very interesting to see if she rises or if someone bests her.
So the challenge really is they have to answer these questions about the group basically, and the answers to the questions will be players that are still in the game, and if those players that are the answers are safe. And the idea is we're trying to dwindle down who is potentially murdered by the Traitors in plain sight the night before. If they can figure that out before the end of the challenge, they'll win $20,000 for the pot. But immediately, Tamara, Peter, and Janelle are safe because they had a shield the night
because
before.
they got shields.
It's almost like we'd forgotten about the shields because
I know, me too.
so much happened, but
when the chalice was going around, she looked like she was going for Peter. I was like, oh my god, she's gonna kill Peter, and I was like, wait, no.
But wait,
it makes you wonder if they would even. I wondered, like, did the shields work in this moment?
Right.
I thought the shields only work
for murder.
The shields are for murder, not for banishment.
Not for banishment. Yeah.
And we also have, before we get started, we think we have a great cutaway from a comment from Tamara where she's the one who speaks up and says in her confessional, like, this is pretty great. Like, if my game. Or when I have a funeral, like, I want black horses, I want a carriage, I want looks, and I think I agree with her. Like, I never imagined what mine would look like, but this would not be. This would be
yes. I would welcome this. Now, the one thing I was worried about this, because if it's gonna lead up to the end of, like, I was afraid that whoever feels like was poisoned or makes the connection that they're gonna be the ones that are gonna die. I was afraid that they were gonna be like, I got to drink from this person and blah blah blah. Like, but they play it really safe.
Yeah,
which is good.
I'm sure there was some guidance around what could be said and not said, and like you really can't talk unless you're talking about the questions. But the last thing before we kick it off is Alan says to the group, I think this is a great line, where he says, "Watch for some Emmy Award-winning acting." And so I'm sure, because there's this whole theme this episode in particular about people saying, like, well, they're overacting, they're really acting. Like, I think they're acting like they're a traitor. Well, that their way they're acting is suspicious. But I do think Alan's line is...
Janelle talk about acting.
Yeah, and I think... well, you act in your show. Well, I don't act in mine. It's like, whatever. You're all acting. Even you're acting in this show.
It's mafia.
You brought costumes to play a game. Like, you are acting.
I mean, think about what the wardrobe prompt was.
Yeah, this is acting. So, I mean, in the setup of looks, like on Drag Race, they had to get like funeral look, like excessive, like opulent funeral.
Opulence,
that's it.
Yes, opulent funeral realness.
Funeral realness.
And the boldness of MJ wearing like a white and black, and she's the only one in white. And I told Adam, was like, she's from Shaws of Sunset.
I love all of the veils. The veils are so good and over the top. But back to Alan's line about that. I thought that was really interesting because I wondered, like, is that a little bit of shade because he's often been nominated for acting Emmys but never won?
I think everything.
It's all tongue in cheek.
Yes, that's why he's a great host, and I really hope he gets a host nomination next time.
It is also a good reminder that, like, this show is it's breaking the wall in a little bit of like in the fourth wall, in that sense of, like, we can acknowledge, like, that this is all a production, and I kind of like that because it's what makes it good. It's what makes it, it's like why we believe it, especially with a cast like this. We believe it because it is so ridiculous, and the fact that Alan kind of just cracks that open and just like acknowledges it, I think is pretty great. So
the best part of it is that, like, people are, we know the conceit, we know the act, but they are treating it like it is life or death, and that's the best.
It is. I mean, I think in the Ampliverse this term is thrown around a lot, but it is camp. It's camp.
It's camp.
It's camp. Is it camp?
It's camp. But is it camp?
It is a camp. So
Susan Sontag from the grave was a consultant for the show.
I mean, literally from the grave. So is it camp wearing black and white? Anyways, okay. So question 1 is the first question they have to answer is players that are safe were born in the same. I know what you're laughing about. Players that are safe are born in the same year as someone else, and so you quickly start to see the group discussing, like, well, when were you born? When was I born? I was born in 1980. This. What about you? What about you? And so Dan and Kevin and Larsa and Sandra are the 4 that are going to be safe, and you get this amazing confessional from Sandra. I'm pretty sure this is like the confessional heard around the world in this episode.
Yes, this was the first clip that I saw before I watched the episode,
where Sandra says, that's really surprising to me that I was born in the same year as Larsa, because I think that she's like 10 to 12 years older than me. I was like, oh. And then, like, Shade Button plays in the background right there.
Yes, Mirage booty pressing the Shade Button on the back. It's very so funny. It's so
they were
funny.
both. Turns out they were both born in 1974,
which would make them 50.
Crazy.
50.
50.
Yeah, we were talking about they were 50.
I mean, and I believe it, but the audacity of Sandra to say that is just
about Larsa
mwah.
Pippen.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm not sure.
I wonder
if,
how much Sandra knows about Larsa outside of this show. Probably not.
Little to nothing.
She could. I mean, maybe she watches Housewives, so maybe she knows. But I would guess not a lot.
I guess not.
Yeah,
Sandra,
I'm sure
Sandra lives her life fine without knowing what's going on with Larsa Pippen.
with about yes,
think so.
she shows up to her once a year convention and she
She gets
goes
the
home.
check.
Yeah, that's it.
Totally.
And she keeps that title. So
Yes.
that's the first question. The second one, we have the perhaps the same cast that was the drummers at the first episode. They are now singers.
They are now funeral choir.
So the casting notice was
Must sing
percussionists slash choral singers slash
sing and
willing to be like funeral directors. Like that was the casting notice for this season of like
God.
background actors. Maybe there'll be more. We're gonna add to that call sheet later, but that's what
I
we have
think
so
they're
far.
they're gonna do the same thing with the season with the masks again. I think
Yeah,
that's
so
gonna go.
also willing to wear a mask, but the call
Yes,
sheet is long. So
Yeah.
we have a choir singing, essentially asking like, who did Johnny Bananas trust the most? And I think it's
it's
Very
pretty obvious
obvious. It
that,
should be very
that it's CT. Of course, Trishelle says, well, it's either me or you. Again, Trishelle's like, what about? It's all about me. It's all about me. It's me or you. And it's
Isn't it funny? She keeps trying to bring this up. Like CT and I don't like each other, but we're forced to work with one another. And I'm not a challenge girlie. You guys aren't. One of our listeners is a challenge girlie and was like,
Go
yeah, it's a
off in the
thing.
chat, please tell us.
Tell us, please educate
Leave
us.
us the comments, drop the receipts. We will watch the clips.
Isn't there a confessional where Trishelle talks about CT being a little bit too broy during their challenge
Yeah,
season?
Yes,
she
the
talked about this later in the
guys.
episode.
The guys, yeah.
They
She
did it.
says the
She
guys.
says, I thought this was really interesting. She said, we did a challenge together, which I think just tells you that these people do a lot of challenges.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
They
that's
did
like their
a
job.
season. Yeah, they did a season of the
mean,
challenge.
It's Wipeout, right? With voting.
It's,
So-
I call it 2000s American Gladiators
yes, it's
Kind
American
of,
Gladiators,
yeah.
absolutely.
with voting.
With
which, I
normal
mean,
people.
with reality stars in their post career. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So that's question 2. So then CT is safe, jumps on the carriage. And then we're like brought to the final question, which is, so basically if you were wearing red during the Scarecrow mission,
In the Scarecrow
so
challenge.
episode 2, then you're safe. And so that's, again, these are not hard questions. These are not hard questions. So Bergie, Cirie, John, and Phaedra are then safe. And that leaves us with MJ, Ekin-Su, and Parv as the potential victims.
So this was where I was really scared because Parv even says it like, I feel so isolated and
yeah.
like I feel like everyone knows it's me that I am a traitor because
And
I
those
am
producers
saying it.
sure did write some questions that would leave her to be there in the end.
Totally.
sure.
But no one.
But again, no one suspects.
No one is
Everyone
suspecting
thinks-
because everyone thinks it's Ekin-Su.
Everyone thinks it's Ekin-Su,
No.
and MJ is the victim. That's what they think. They think
Oh, everyone
Ekin-Su
thinks
is the one that murdered MJ, which, again,
On what?
why?
basis? On
Because
what
up
ground?
until this point, they've been kind of close and clicking.
Kind of
We
in the
haven't seen
same-
anything between them. So, again, this tells us that either they're way off or there's a lot we're not seeing.
Meanwhile, Ekin-Su is convinced that it's her correctly.
Yeah, she thinks it's going to be her. And there could have been a lot of people who said that, and that's just the kind of clips we're getting to build this kind of tension up to the murder. But so then we're kind of brought to the end. And so we get another buried alive moment, which, is another beat we've got to hit on this show. And at this point, there's like one final task, which is everybody now has to vote who they think is the victim. And if they get it right, they win the 20K. If they get it wrong, they get nothing, and the person still gets murdered. So it's an all or nothing. And the first one to vote, I think, is CT, and he says it's MJ. Basically says like MJ's really outspoken.
Yes, loud. Yeah.
She's not very. I think he says loud. She's not really well liked in the house or in the group. And then at that point, no one wants to stick their neck out, and so they just kind of pile votes on, and it's this thing we see in reality shows a lot, where we just see unanimous votes because no one wants to do something away from the group. But
Totally.
so we're dropping black roses.
They are
in their
dropping
coffins.
black roses in these
This is
coffins.
the most macabre, camp, ridiculous.
Here's the thing that I'll say about the murders of the traitors, and it's they do these B-roll of them getting ready for bed, right? Like in a classic murder, and then they'll get a letter, and then they find out. I do wish there was a camp death for each of them that they pre-film, and then they'll just play that for us.
Kind of like in we kind of get that in Dracula.
Yeah, like the Dracula murders.
Yes. But I almost wish because there was something fun about Ekin-Su finding out it's her. Gasp. Close the coffin, you know?
Yeah,
but I almost
slam.
wish everyone had that.
And you've got Alan kind of pacing behind the coffins with his staff.
Alan
who is
was
it gonna be?
Loving this episode.
Acting with a capital A.
And just the reactions to them. Oh my god, we're really doing this. They're getting in coffins. You see that? There's a shot of Janelle reacting after they lay down in the coffins. I think we have it.
With her bestie, Tamra.
With her bestie, Tamra. There we
BFF
go.
Tamra.
Yeah,
Her
BFF.
Future
Friend
sister.
of.
Future friend
Friend of.
yes.
And so they're voting, they have to say why, which is a very who should go home and why moment. So we get potential some sources of drama, and the fact that they're all putting everything out there about MJ, and MJ ends up staying because we know that Ekin-Su was murdered is really interesting, because now it feels like there's all of this talk in the
about MJ,
in the group about why people don't like MJ, why she would likely be murdered. And then, Alan dramatically, like we said, reveals that it's actually Ekin-Su and just like slams the coffin shut. It's really great cinema.
It's so good.
Yeah. And then you get, the reactions of Parvati and MJ surviving, and then you get the group. What? Oh my gosh. And I have to imagine that the producers are saying, okay, one more time, we're going to react to this because they're so ridiculous.
Yeah, so many
just can we turn that up about 3 more notches? So Janelle says, "What's going on?" And I think you made this note.
Sandra does not miss a beat, and she says, "We just lost $20,000."
Yeah, Janelle says, "What's going on, Sandra? We lost $20K," which is
so Sandra,
right on par for Sandra. They bury the coffin, ashes to ashes. Alan throws the dust because now he's also,
she's
presiding over the burial. He's been ordained, which is interesting because in season 1 we see him in a confessional box. In season 2 we see him at a burial
performing last rites. Yeah.
So I'm thinking next season are we going to see him performing a marriage? I think
there's going to be a black wedding. Absolutely.
Oh, that would be so. Okay,
it's gonna be Fergus, and then
we're we're writing all of
who is marrying Fergus.
Oh yeah, the winner have to marry.
The winner will have to marry.
We need
Fergus.
to file this away with all of our season 3 guesses.
Wish list.
Wish list. Yeah. So they bury the coffin, and then we head back to the castle. However many minutes later or whatever. Obviously, it's dinner time, and this is where we get the discussion kind of leading up to banishment.
So at dinner, I was watching this with Adam, and he was like, "Wow, they're really going off on this funeral concept. They're having the catered funeral afterwards too. They're eating at the church hall." And I was like, "No, girl, that's how they feed them every episode."
But I think that's
little catering things. They take their food out of.
That's a great noticing from Adam, and that they're having dinner after.
Because in their funeral, yeah.
Okay, producer Adam. Okay, thank you. It's really great. They're probably funeral potatoes. You're right, because it's looking a little homey. This
it was
this
giving
episode,
biscuits and gravy, the way Kevin was
that
scraping this plate, bitch.
I was guessing dumplings of some chicken and dumplings of some sort. It was something soupy or saucy.
You can tell it was it was Southern food. If it gave that vibe.
Taken aback. What's the Scottish equivalent of Google's Scottish equivalent of funeral potatoes? Anyways, so we get fingers and mash. Yeah. So we get a couple seeds here that are really going to set up the banishment discussion at the round table. So we come back to this strong man discussion from Larsa, and Larsa kind of gathers up all of the women, several of the women, including Sandra and Phaedra and the other housewives, and says we've got to figure this out. And Sandra's like, well, let's go look at the board, basically. Let's
go to
look
the
at
board.
the
Let's go to the board.
And it's a beautiful shot. And here it is. It's a beautiful shot where they're saying, well, it can't be them.
So
they're
funny.
not smart enough. No one suspects them. It's either and like they've been saying, they suspect it's either Dan or CT. But they leave that discussion kind of zoomed in on CT, which is interesting because, Larsa was very pro Dan before this. I don't know where the heat and attention comes from for CT at this point, but it's this alpha thing that they've hung on to. And then,
I think they did a good job.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan's MO was to try and get heat off of him, and I think he skated by knowing that CT just has a bigger personality.
Yeah.
But
At some point,
yeah.
At some point, Dan must have addressed the feedback that he wasn't talking.
That he's too quiet.
Because that was a big storyline in episode 1 and 2, and now that's not being mentioned at all.
Yeah, so I think in a really, I don't know, this is like a pretty remarkable move here.
Yeah.
This is like a Big Brother moment where Sandra like runs to another group, or like Survivor. This is basically between Immunity Challenge and Tribal Council moment, where it's like the scramble about where the vote's gonna lie, and I mean, which is what it is. It is like that's exactly what it is. But Sandra then runs to the gamers, which we basically believe that that's the clique that she's really in, and she said, well, they said it. Sandra goes, it's either going to be Dan or CT, and they're leaving with CT. And so Dan's like, well, we got to vote Larsa. And Sandra says, all right, well, we'll vote Larsa. And boom. So
that's it.
We see Sandra floating, essentially playing both sides here, and it does not come up.
No, in plain sight. She literally goes like
you watch her, it's like one corridor basically, and you see her walk from one group to the next. And
you also realize that half of the show is simply filmed on security cameras.
Yeah, just like in the hallways, in the hall, and in the bookshelf. Like they're all just the same shots, but it's I don't know why this is so interesting to me. And maybe it's because in any other show that we watch, and maybe we'll see it later, there would be the discussion after this discussion of like, how did CT find out his name was like getting thrown around? And, Larsa's not really there to drum that up after the banishment, but
but it doesn't feel like that's really a thing unless it's like out of left field. Like sometimes they talk about like who brought up my name and let me defend myself to this person, because they're still in such a hive mentality in this, especially this cast right now, because they haven't gotten a traitor yet. It feels like they're just like, if there's a name, you run with it.
That Housewives Bravo group, I just don't think is there yet.
No,
but it is like it's showing us, at least as an audience, that like Sandra is really well positioned.
Totally.
She's like getting info from one side, taking it to another. She's well protected. And we really see Sandra mostly kind of like huddling up with the gamers. Like that's who she's really with. But it's just a great move. And I think illustrates that thing we talked about earlier, which is like Sandra's in a great spot.
Totally.
Her name has yet to come up at all. And then that's really where we get Alan saying like, and now it's time for the round table. We get another mini look from him. Makes me think this was filmed in post, but
I think so too.
The embroidery is great.
Yes, we just need something.
It's the pickup shots that you basically need to get after the fact of like, okay, we're gonna need these transitions, so we're gonna keep Alan one day after production wrap, or one day before production's over.
Well, oddly enough, he's not in the cloak that he uses in all the other pickup shots. So we'll see if this look reappears later in the season.
It is great embroidery, so if we it's a nice embroidered trench coat. So, and then we get we're basically ready for round table.
The round table. The traitors turn the turntable. The round table. There he is. He's back in his funeral look again, without the adornments. It's just this sheer black, iconic blouse. So we've got. Okay, so I just want to set the scene, right? Larsa has set up for the housewives, or just like in general, but the closest to her are the housewives that are saying, we're going to pick CT. CT's the one. Sandra runs, says CT or Dan. Janelle starts the discussion, which is very interesting, because I think there was that little cutaway when they decide they're going to go to the board. I think Janelle like stays. She has like this reaction of like, oh, okay, interesting, as the girls all run to the board and figure it out. Janelle is the one who immediately says that she thinks it's Larsa, or points to Larsa, because when they're trying to figure out when was the appropriate time to poison someone, Janelle says that because Larsa cheers for Marcus after Marcus dies, let's say, hey, to Marcus, to Marcus.
For Marcus.
Yeah, cheers for Marcus.
Everyone drinks. So to her, she's like, well, that's suspicious, because then that made everyone drink. To which Larsa's like, why would I murder my own boyfriend? And then Peter is like, girl, because it's strategy, girl. What are you talking about?
It is like people would not suspect it. It would be a good strategic move.
It totally.
Yeah.
And now with Larsa being targeted, that's where she comes off and starts saying like, okay, this is this is the theory that I've had this entire episode. Basically, I think it is an alpha man, a strong alpha man that can direct everyone and is telling everyone what to do. And she thinks that it's CT. Kevin immediately is like, that doesn't hold up for me. I don't think that makes sense. And it's weird. I couldn't tell if he was like, are you defending yourself as like, I'm an alpha man, so it's not me? Or were they saying that he's not an alpha? It was very confusing, because I think the zeitgeist understanding of the word alpha, like we said, is different than how it's being used in the
house
show.
or in the group.
I was interpreting it as the group did not think that he himself was an alpha.
Kevin?
They didn't categorize as him as that.
They were like, we don't, but we don't mean you.
We don't mean you, Kevin. Eat your bangers and mash. Not you, girl. So all of these names, once Kevin starts talking, that's kind of like we get a little bit of this Kevin and MJ moment too, right? Where they kind of Kevin is like, it's not going to be a strong alpha. I think it's someone honestly like MJ, and basically he's like, frankly, I find you annoying, and he just says it. And that is not, to anyone that will ever play Traitors, that is not a reason to pick someone as a traitor.
No,
sorry, that's not how mafia works.
Again, really showing our naivete to this game, I think, in that moment.
Isn't it so funny? I'm curious, because you watched a little bit of the other international Traitors, right? Do these stereotypes appear? Is there a Ryan Lochte in every season?
Well, again, UK, we've watched Canada, which had a mix of, non-reality people and stars, but UK is purely non-reality stars.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really dynamic. What you get in those, I think, is like a lot of assumptions about people's like jobs, which is like what you get like the first time people are on Big Brother or Survivor is like, well, they're a lawyer, so they're really smart.
They'd be good at this. Yeah,
they're at this, so they're really that. I think. Well, I think that's really what they're a nurse. That's what you get. You get a lot of like archetypes and generalizations about people's jobs and backgrounds, but not no.
But very interesting, because that comes up here. Miss Parvati is like, well, there are people here that may be better at performing over than the other people. And when I think of performers, I think of the actors, and I think of the housewives, like people in Bravo. To which Larsa was like, we're not performing. This is our lives.
This is our lives.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
I want to do like a pause, and then it's like, well, that's the moment where
that's it. And it truly, this becomes now like the housewives are targeted, right? That they are a block that needs to be broken up. Parvati calls it out, and it is so frustrating for me as a lover of both Parvati and Phaedra in this show, because if you
are that tweet from today,
I am that tweet.
The world preparing for Parvati gays versus Phaedra gays.
This mother off that is about to happen.
Yeah.
Because
meanwhile, Sandra gays over here waiting for those two to take each other out.
We're playing the long game over here.
We are. Sandra gays are loving it. Because if you think about it, all of this decision for Parvati to like basically paint the housewives this way, you could say stemmed from when Dan was like, we got to get Phaedra out someday. We got to at least point the finger to the housewives at some point, which I think big picture, that is smart.
Yeah,
but it's showing to us, because we know what's going on, that Parvati is saying, I trust Dan more to take me to the end than Phaedra.
I think Dan and I can get farther. And a little bit later, I think I want to talk about Janelle, what we think about Janelle and Sandra's take on things. I want to talk about that later. I want to come to that later.
Okay. So the housewives are pitted against, are pointed at, and Phaedra is immediately like, don't do the housewives thing. She says the most iconic line. She says, don't come for the housewives. We're not a gang. Don't do all that, Parvati.
It's going to go in the canon of like housewives clips, right?
So good. Don't do that, Parvati. I just want to eat it up. It's so delicious.
I really want that moment paired with, we don't act.
They're not actors. They're not performing.
And what's
this
going
is
to
their
happen
lives.
later
And what's going to happen in the turret.
Totally. So they start voting. There are a few strays. Kevin obviously is going for MJ. There is a big consensus on Kevin, actually, right? Like Kevin kind of picks up heat from the housewives.
Yes, this is the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Housewives do not vote together.
The housewives do not vote together. That is the thing.
You need to caucus. You need to caucus before you go to vote.
Sheree votes for John.
Sheree votes for John and says,
what
John,
is she doing?
I don't think you're the traitor. I just don't know. I can't decide.
I
don't know what's going on.
The explanation I have for that is that Sheree wants to be able to show up in any conversation and say, well, I didn't vote for you.
Yes.
Like, I think she just wants to stay good with as
Sheree's
many
blocking,
people as possible. So she's trying to prevent that. But you're right. Like, if these housewives are really trying to watch out for each other, they need to be
together. And that's
how alliances work.
If I was a person like in the John, Kevin, Bergie, Peter, I would be like, they all didn't vote together. So maybe they're not all. I think they're more susceptible.
So someone in there knows more. What that would tell me is that someone in that group knows more than someone else, and they're not all. They don't all have the same information,
or they're not all playing the same game because one of them is a traitor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or there's multiple traitors. Who knows?
I think other people. I really hope we get some reactions to the vote next episode.
Me too. Yeah. We really
need the post vote, which is like that opening of the Survivor episode or the Big Brother episode after the eviction or the elimination. Talking. You need the reaction. We need that. We really need that.
I need people to know. I need people to be like, wait, they didn't all vote together.
Yeah, why would Sheree vote for John? I want Janelle to say... Why would Sheree
vote for John? They all voted for Kevin. They were all convinced that Larsa is the ringleader, when she was the only one who voted for CT in the entire roundtable. Clearly not even...
She should be mad at her friends for not helping her out.
You get a little bit of that talk in the post with...
the little bit.
With CT and Trishelle kind of talking about something's up with those.
Something's up. We should stick together.
It's a good seed for some good foreshadowing.
So they vote. Larsa ultimately becomes the big target. I think what Janelle says really sets it up as that is the most quote unquote damning evidence, because that was a very clear way to poison everyone. If you were to do it. So Larsa on her banishment says, you guys are proven wrong. You're led astray. My favorite moment was Phaedra writing Kelvin, but she doesn't pronounce it Kelvin. She says Kevin. No. Everyone says Kevin.
She very clearly says Kevin.
Whatever.
This is why Phaedra Parks is so perfect on the show. It's so good. And I'm just heartened that my faves are pitted against one another.
Yeah, they're doing great.
I mean, so we talked about, right, that there was no unity in Larsa's vote, and the Phaedra obviously doesn't vote. MJ doesn't vote the same way. And Sandra was the one who said, I'm in the talking head. I'm close. I'm chummy with the housewives, but I'm faithful to the gamers is kind of how she puts it. And so she's the one that votes Larsa. Larsa is banished. And in the once Larsa is banished, Cirie is so mad.
She always has the most. She's almost like the first reaction we get. After
She
a
is the
time.
first reaction. She's
Yeah,
so
we
mad
got her
every
after
time.
Peppermint. We got her after Max.
But it's so funny because she also was wrong too.
Yeah,
She's also very wrong.
and not voting with anyone.
Not voting with anyone. So it's very
Again, I think she's just trying to
good.
keep eyes off of her with her
Totally.
vote.
Earlier in the
She doesn't
episode,
want any- she
I
doesn't want
think
any,
during the funeral procession, there's a cutaway to her in a confessional saying, I think we're about to get this like right. We're about to be on the traitors.
No.
She is so far off.
So
No,
wrong.
ma'am. No, ma'am. So Larsa is banished. Cirie is passed. And I think this really sets up now we are establishing non-reality versus
the
reality.
line has been drawn in this.
Yes,
here.
non-competitive reality, the gamers.
Yeah.
And at this point, the housewives, but I think I'm curious if the housewives, quote unquote, will pull together also the faithful, like
Bringing some of the floaters.
The floaters.
bringing some of the floaters in. And I hope they do. As much as I love Janelle and Parvati, I do want to see Dan get voted off. I'm sorry. I want Dan out. I want to see
Dan
it.
has to go for Janelle to get farther.
That's fine.
Bye.
Yeah.
I will keep
I need to
Janelle,
see- Yeah.
Janelle, Parvati, Sandra over Dan
Yeah.
any day.
Yeah. I need to see Dan be bested.
But
I
I'm
like
starting to
seeing
worry.
him. I like seeing him kind of like not know what to do in a game that is so social.
Yeah,
It was so interesting for him to have to like cover his bases in that way. So very interesting.
So it's so yeah. So Larsa's gone.
Larsa is gone, and we go to the Traitors turret, and we know that it's going to be tense, obviously, because Parvati and Phaedra had their little tiff. And as soon as they take off their clothes, Phaedra just looks at Parvati like, immediately.
This really is a visual podcast.
Just looks at her and says, what did she say? She says, don't do that. We don't play games.
She said
Right.
that wasn't cool.
Oh,
That
yeah.
wasn't cool. Then Dan,
That wasn't
Dan says,
cool.
wait, what
Dan says
happened?
what?
What are you talking about?
We have the play-by-play on our notes.
Dan being
Phaedra.
gobsmacked.
Phaedra, that wasn't cool. Dan, wait, what happened? Which I hate it that he's getting away scot-free between
Yes.
this two interaction. I'm so
Give me
mad.
a break. Give me a break,
I'm
Dan.
so mad, but I can't help it because it's like, God damn it, that's so good.
good, yeah.
It's good. It's good gameplay.
Just let them go after each other.
And Phaedra goes in. She says, "No one likes you, Parvati. No one likes you."
She said, everyone thinks you're a effing traitor. Which we don't have the background to build up. So it's like,
is true or not?
is
we
that
don't
true?
know.
But there could, I mean, we don't know that it's true. We don't have the background on that. But what if that's just like a seed Phaedra's trying to plant? Because if she's thinking about it, Parvati can't really go try to figure that out because it's going to just
That's
bring
the
more
thing.
suspicion. So she could just be
Exactly.
trying to plant seeds in Parvati's mind to help her to make
Exactly.
her spiral. So it could be a really great move on Phaedra's part to
Parvati?
be planting that.
Parvati can't go to the housewives and verify this.
No, because they're
Parvati
just going to be
now-
like, why are you? Yeah, what are you worried about? You worried because you're suspicious because you're a traitor? Like,
Yes.
she's kind of cornered her.
Oh my God, the mother
good.
off.
It's good. It's good.
So
It's good.
good.
Yeah, it's good.
literally. So Phaedra says, yeah. So, and no one likes you. Everyone thinks you're an effing traitor. We can be in this game together, but we are going to play fair. If not, you have more problems than the faithful. I'm playing very fair with you. Don't do that to me. Both of you. Both of you.
Scene cut.
Period. Credits. See you next
See you
week.
next week.
Wow.
Clap, clap, finger claps.
My God.
Good. It's really good.
It's good. It's good. And you know what? You totally sold me that no one knows that's real. So Phaedra may have just planted that because she knows I could go back and easily plant Parvati to Sheree, to MJ, to John, to
Yeah, and it is
Well,
to Kevin,
if she can get them all to vote the same.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's, Parvati's, I think, position is, well, I didn't say you, and everyone was already like, and Parvati could have known and might tell Phaedra, the group was going to go for Larsa. It wasn't
they're
about
gonna
you.
go for Larsa. It was
And-
Larsa out of all of the housewives.
Yeah, and
immediately.
it's almost like we're just playing volleyball now of like
Totally.
attention on housewives, attention
Our
on
time
the game,
and
attention
your
on
time.
yeah,
Yes,
and like
I could very much see that as like we have to put some spotlight on the housewives, or else like
it is going to come back
It's
to
gonna
you
be
if you're going to
suspicious,
if the four of
right?
you are going to continue to
especially
stay here. And
if the 3 traitors, 2 of them are gamers. So it's
Yeah,
like we
and-
just have to even it out.
so this is where there was a scene, I think post mission before banishment or post banishment before turret time, whatever, where Dan, Sandra, Parvati, and Janelle are sitting together. So those 4 are obviously close.
Right.
And what we haven't heard Janelle say yet is, what if a gamer was a traitor? And so I really have to wonder if Janelle somewhere is thinking, okay, one of these people is going to be a traitor too. Like, it's gotta be like, it can't, there's no way. Janelle is smart enough to know that someone in that
Someone
group
in
of
their
4
group.
is a traitor.
Just
And that's the thinking I really want to hear. Like, I want to
I
hear
need to
what
know
she's-
that that's actually
I
happening.
need to know that that's what she's thinking.
Well-
but like, I think what she's probably doing this is a lot of speculation, but it's like what I imagine she's doing is she knows in a perfect world, she knows this. She's smart enough not to say anything. She's going to stay tight so that Parvati and Dan or whoever the traitors are in the group have no reason to suspect her because she's so loyal to them
Yeah.
to be protected for a really long time. And that's why I think like she and Sandra are playing really well.
Really good. Yeah.
Because they're showing up really faithful to Dan and Parvati. So they're not going to come up for murder. And if they're playing faithful, Janelle and Sandra are probably thinking like, well, we won't vote for them because we want to stay on their good side for a while. So we don't have to worry about banishment either. So I feel like they're kind of using the traitors in that group as a shield without really knowing who they are. I really think that that's what might be
They're
going
playing
on. And
low.
it's good.
They're
It's
playing
really
low.
good.
The only thing
And-
I would be really concerned with is that Janelle doesn't have any allies outside of the gamers. They all think she's shellfish because she keeps shellfish.
going for the shield.
They think she's
Shellfish
clams.
for the shield.
The shellfish for the shield.
We don't have a lot of that in Minnesota.
So somebody in this episode mentioned that they thought there were 4 traitors, 2
Two
guys.
women, two
that they are
women.
convinced to. I think it was.
I think
it was
Janelle
in the
says that.
Housewives group. Yeah.
Yeah, is it Janelle or
Yeah.
a housewife? I don't
Maybe
remember.
it was Janelle when she
It
was in
could have
that
been Janelle.
hallway
It's in the
It's
hallway.
in that group of women when they were
Yeah.
at the board,
at the board
at the memory wall.
at the memory wall trying to
Oh,
count
no.
votes. Yeah.
That's what we're just gonna start calling things. Yeah.
I think with Janelle, I'm afraid for her because I think when it's time for her to act, the numbers will already be against her when it comes to the gamers. So I think
Unless
her
she
best,
can get Tamara
Unless
to protect her.
unless she can get Tamara, so that's one side there.
So
and
Tamara
she
is
picks
kind
up
of
the
in
challenge.
those combos saying like,
Yeah.
no, it's not Janelle. Janelle's a faithful. It's not Janelle. Like as long as she can if she can
Because
get Tamara to kind of vouch for her, then we'll be okay. But if Janelle keeps voting for Housewives, that's not going to help her case with Tamara. So I'm
That
not
is
sure what's going to go on there.
that is what I think the biggest asset for keeping for the housewives in this game. They are loud.
Yeah.
And people listen. People will listen to them.
They're rallying votes. They're leading conversations.
They're
like,
leading conversations.
Yeah, and next in our fantasy casting, which we will do off season, like there's gonna need to be a few housewives, so I'm gonna need
totally.
we're gonna need to do some
We're gonna need
research
a menu of
about who it's gonna
housewives.
be.
I don't
We'll
know
get
if
some
Bethany
suggestions.
Frankel will do it, but my God.
I think I've seen a lot of discussion for
Please.
Luann, and I think that that's probably a good choice.
Oh, that's definitely a good choice.
Nini is like an obvious choice. I
You
feel
know
like,
who I don't want involved? Andy Cohen. I'm sorry. I don't think Andy should host the reunion. I think it should be
No,
Alan.
I agree.
I think it should be Alan or Cirie.
Oh, that would be fun.
These will all be bits when we get later in the season. We'll get there. We'll get there. But if Andy hosting this show is what keeps it kind of in its status on the network, we're fine, because I think we saw that like the premiere episode was up 75%,
75%
season 2 over season 1, which is like
totally
for a streaming platform like
for a
this.
streaming show. Yeah, it's tough.
If Andy being involved keeps it in NBC's good graces, like he can have the reunion.
And also,
and he's probably a key to getting people cast.
That's the thing. I think
Yeah.
Andy's the one that's making sure they're in.
He
But
probably left that reunion last year and said, we need to get some housewives on this show.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're all reaping the benefits, so he can stay. He can stay.
This one time only.
at least it's just one episode. The thing with the discourse online, so there's one so Janelle, we said it was on Tamara's podcast, and they were going in on how bad Parvati's acting was already in this episode.
We need to listen. We try to save all reactions till after we record.
I just saw that one clip because Tamara was going off on like she just looked so fake. It was so clearly that she was like pretending, and Janelle was like, "Oh yeah, totally," which makes me think: it's just them reacting to it, or they're kind of like planting a timeline in our heads of like they probably were already could tell because even if Parvati is great, like when you're just looking at 3 people. It's you can see that crack. Yeah. So I think Parvati is like getting a very thankless run as a traitor right now because she is getting all the heat and she's doing all of Dan's work.
All the work, she's getting all the screen time. So she's gonna leave this season fine regardless, but I think we're gonna have to see how it plays out.
Game wise, yeah, we're gonna see. There was that, and then also obviously it was like the Bravo gays and the Bravo gays and the Survivor gays were going after each other, but then the gays who love both are eating the show up. So.
Eating it up. Yeah. So one more observation before we move on to Alan looks. For anyone who watched Big Brother, Dan famously had a funeral. And here in this episode, we are experiencing a funeral.
Just another these little cinematic parallels that for the people who've been in it for a while,
yes,
it really means something to us.
It does. And for the people who are involved but not used to the competitive reality show format, maybe like Ari and Quentin. Who Ari on Instagram story got asked have you talked to Cirie? And Ari was like, no, a lot was cut out, but I truly think that was like a dirty, underhanded move, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then Quentin reposted it
also
and was
bitter.
Like, bitter, like, that's right, diva.
And then the best tweet reaction to that I saw was those clips of like the last episode of Big Brother where you get like Cirie and all these like silly green screen like vacation photos on like a beach,
robe,
and
her
it's just
iconic
like
robe.
Cirie watching Andy or Ari and Quentin go off on Twitter. She's just like she cashed the check. It doesn't. The check cleared.
The check cleared. The check cleared.
Who Elaine Stritch? Who cares? .gif. Like who cares?
It's so good. Okay. We are going to select our favorite Alan look. Alan's bonniest look. I mean, it's the funeral,
so
right?
For those who don't know, a bonnie is a positive term in Scottish slang. You just have to tell everyone if this is your first episode. So this is where we toot our favorite look. I mean, I'm going to say
it's the processional.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I would
full
say
adorned.
For sure.
Fully
so if we all agree, let's pick one.
Do we have a shot of them all in one place?
Oh yeah, go to the last slide actually has all of
she
his
does
looks for today.
all of our looks.
Yeah, listen.
Oh, there she is.
This is my special. I make decks all day long. Okay.
Decks for days, bitch.
Decks for days.
Period.
Okay.
Period.
I mean, the post show recording that is not giving it for me. I mean, it really is just the same look because he has a little jacket in the first
Okay, so let me push it further. Which piece of the look is the best for you? What's the best micro piece?
What is that called? That little thing with the tassels. I don't know my Scottish apparel.
I don't know.
God, don't what?
While we're looking that up, I'm gonna say for me, it's the shirt. The shirt with the pussy bow is the standout item.
Here we go. It's called a spren. It's Scottish for purse.
There you go.
Spren. I could probably have it. Whatever. Pronunciation.
The pussy bow is definitely. I think the sheer shirt is such a slay. Sprun.
Sporin.
Sporin.
All right. So that's for you. Yours is the pussy bow?
Yes.
Yeah. I would have guessed that, but I would go with, I think I'll take the hat and veil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The accessories. He also usually wears these, I don't know what they're called, but they're like the like half gloves that just like cut off on his palm.
Yes.
It's so good. Yeah. He looks great. Nominate the costume. He does look so
costume
good.
design.
Costume design for Nemi. Yeah, we'll also.
Sorry, we're here, but we're gonna take it
just for one season. Just for one season.
Just once. It's okay. It's okay. All right, we've come to the favorite part of our show. Who are we most faithful to?
You know, I don't want to keep changing my answer every episode, but I gotta say Sandra.
Yeah, why?
Right?
Just cause she's in a great spot. She's doing great work. She's doing great work over there. It's like advocating for her reality competition girlies, but also being friends with those housewives. Like, she's positioning herself so well. She's playing that low and slow game that she's so good at.
She kind of identified who was in charge. She's like making friends with both sides. Yeah, she's playing a good
She's
game.
like quietly social. She's not very outwardly social. You don't really hear from her that much at the round table, but she has connections, obviously.
Yeah. What about you, RJ? Arjo?
What's smart about Sandra is that she's also not leading who the finger should be pointed at, which I think also helps. She is just kind of like, she really,
never offer a name, but always take it.
But always take it. Yeah. It's, I mean, the Sandra, anybody but me, DS Twine, right? Like, that's how she's won 2 seasons.
Put it on a t-shirt.
This is really tough.
Sandra for you?
This is really tough, but I think I'm also going to go with Sandra. I wish there was one episode where we could all individually pick different people, but
I know.
I'm getting tired of the Instagram post being 2 faces in one. I wish there were 6 portraits on that.
It would be obvious for me to say Janelle because I have said a lot about what she's doing well. But if the purpose of the question is like who's playing the best game, who's most well positioned, it is Sandra tonight.
Oh my god!
It makes me think that like some of these
who are you most faithful to?
Who am I most faithful to?
Just
Janelle.
do it. Just say it. Yeah, I mean you're most faithful to Janelle to a default. But
Until
we're talking about episode per episode.
Yeah.
Who are you most faithful to this episode?
I'm going to say Sandra because I know Janelle's got another episode in her later.
I think Janelle's episode is coming. Even though she's done a great job kind of owning the shields whenever that, like she has a moment every episode. That's great. Yep. But I think there's going to be an episode where she...
Yeah. I will go Sandra on this one.
I really think Tamra and Janelle are going to get Dan out. That is my...
That's a possibility.
So I like prediction. I said, I think what we're not seeing is Janelle looking at the gamer group and thinking like,
which one?
Someone is here. And to that point, because she doesn't really know who, she has to go outside that clique to get the numbers. And so I think you're right. Somewhere there's going to be a conversation where she's like, it's a gamer, but it's not me. So it's like, I need one of you to like throw the name. Right. And Tamra, I'm sure Tamra is going to be like, let me be the one. So when that episode happens, we will be Janelle, but for tonight, we'll be Sandra.
I do think we need to take a moment to reflect that last week, RJ, you picked your girl.
Larsa.
I picked Larsa as I was most faithful to. So
you didn't see this coming.
I did not see it coming, but I will say Larsa had a great, kind of like Peppermint. She ran the whole arc of the episode. Larsa ran the whole arc of this episode. She did a great job. And at the end of the day, if they do that for me, I am fully satisfied. I was fully satisfied with what I was able to get from Larsa.
Like we said about Peppermint. I think that there's so many people in this show that we love. We are so loyal to, like we are legitimate stands for that. Like we know someone has to die. Like Phaedra would say, like someone has to die. But it's like, if we can be satisfied with that performance, if they get those moments, then it's like, it's enough for us. And that tells you how good the show is.
Totally.
If we as an audience can be satisfied with someone leaving like that.
Totally.
It's I think
definitely
it's an
way
of the
more
show,
than the first
strength
season,
of the show.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like first season's banishments and murders felt like an afterthought. Where here, it's a moment every time, which is really nice.
Which is really nice. Yeah. And I think the only other thing, we talked about this last episode, but like it was put out in a trailer that next episode we are getting a returning player.
We are.
And so what we have to wonder is like, is this because Deontay left? Is this because it was always the plan? I don't think it would happen quick enough. I think it would be way too fast to where they just called her.
The rumor is this was always planned.
Yeah, and it's gonna be great.
I wish we wouldn't have had it spoiled.
Yeah, why? Yeah,
why did they announce it? Because they didn't need. I don't think they needed it. The show was doing great.
The only thing is that it was announced almost immediately after episode 3, so maybe they weren't sure what the reaction was going to be. But if they had waited like a day, hold on to that trailer, because people would have been eating it up while they were waiting for episode 5. Yeah. But yeah,
or just like in a full surprise. Don't even. Like, you just wait.
Tease somebody.
You just need like an extra knock at the door, and it's like, boom, it's Kate. Like,
it's Kate. Yeah.
End the show, right? End the episode right there. It's great.
I am so excited. I love the show. It's so juicy. Better. It keeps getting better, and I'm really hoping for. I do want to see these traitors to finally be voted out, but I wish it's Dan.
Yeah, it's.
I really hope.
Okay, I think
keep my mother safe.
He's definitely I gotta wrap this up, but like he's definitely trying to have Parvati and he's happy with Parvati and Phaedra going back and forth. He's also kind of with Parvati on saying like maybe it's Phaedra, so he's trying to find the way to get either of them out. But the problem is, as far as the house goes, his is the only name that's been floated.
Truly.
And that's really where it's gonna hurt. So truly. I think one of them's gotta go soon, or is gonna have to go soon, and it will be. If Dan ends up leaving, it's going to be epic. It's going to be great.
Yeah, for sure.
Wait. Can't wait. Well, Joe.
All right, Joe's.
Another job well done. Thank you, everyone.
Well done. We did it, Joe.
We did.
Don't forget to tune in next week. Until then, stay faithful. Goodbye.
Bye.
Discovering voices, building worlds. The Ampliverse.